Welcome back and welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson. The headlines today, well, they're all consuming and there is a lot to talk about. And I always have great joy in talking with our good friend, Megan Barth. Megan is quite the person. She's an independent journalist. She's in the know. She's everywhere. She's the only person I know that puts jalapeno on her cereal and sugar in her coffee.
Add a little Tabasco on top of it. We got a sundae. Cereal sundae.
How are you?
I'm great, Perry. How are you doing?
Okay. Well, a lot to talk to you about. So, Comey and Brennan back in the news, under investigation. Wow. Do you know offhand, Megan, if both of them were given any kind of an immunity, or are they free to go for this?
I don't remember seeing them in the auto pen dump of all of the pardons, unless Biden somehow adopted them and made them his sons. I don't believe they are subject or protected by a pardon. What I find curious about this leaked investigation is I've been involved in investigations. I'm an investigative reporter. I've worked undercover all over the place. You don't announce that you're having an investigation. You keep the investigation under wraps. You don't show your hand. And so I'm a little skeptical as to this announcement of an investigation of two horrible bad actors that undermined, as Democrats would call it, our democracy, and really started the impeachment, if you will, when Trump came down the golden escalator and announced his presidency. They were hell-bent on creating, fake dossiers, spreading misinformation, using the press as their lackeys to do so. And, should they be under investigation? Yes. But do I want to hear about it in the front page news on Fox News? No.
That's an interesting point. So do you have any idea why they announced it?
I think because they needed to take away the anger from many in the MAGA movement, from the announcement of AG Pam Bondi and President Trump that and the FBI, et cetera, of the Jeffrey Epstein case. That's my personal opinion. I think they needed to diffuse that news, diffuse the anger and the noise and the blowback around that announcement related to Epstein, that there is no there.
Okay, that is interesting. Never connected those dots. That's why you're here. That's very, very interesting. Two of those big stories breaking at the same time. But I want to stay with the Brennan Comey thing just for a moment. Don't you think it's worth investigating?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that, Brennan, well, let's just go back to Brennan, a very powerful deep state saboteur, CIA, voted for a communist for president, and has dirt. If you remember Clapper, James Clapper should be under investigation as well, and I hope he is. But he admitted that he unwittingly, he and the cabal, if you will, that includes Comey, that includes Clapper, that includes others, that they unwittingly spied on elected politicians, and specifically Republicans. So if they were spying and getting away, looking at their private communications, looking at their email communications, basically bugging offices, if you will, bugging computers, gathering as much dirt as they would need, or even to create dirt on those that they deemed a threat to their omnipotence, their power. So yes, I do think that they should be under investigation. And I believe that Comey lied to the American people. He lied to Congress. They're on record lying to Congress, making conflicting statements. And so that right there doesn't really require more investigation, except looking at the tapes and then You
Okay.
know.
So one other question here. What is it about then candidate Trump that so frightened them that they had to do this to stop from him getting elected? What is it about that person that they would go to this extent to try to interrupt his candidacy?
He was the single greatest threat to their power. He was the single greatest threat to their power. He wasn't an insider. He wasn't a politician. He wasn't even selected by the GOP. He came. He was a threat to the GOP. He was a threat, to Mitch McConnell, to the Bush dynasty, to the Clinton dynasty. He was not supposed to beat Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton was their savior. It was the deep state's savior. It was Comey and Clapper and Brennan's savior. They did everything they could in order to protect her. If you recall, even the FBI, I think it was pre-Comey, lost her laptop. Come on.
With a cloth.
Right. Yeah. She cleaned it with a cloth, and then she sent it in, and then it got lost in the mail.
Yeah.
And so he was the number one threat. He was going to tip their apple cart. He was going to expose the deep state. He campaigned against the deep state. He was talking about the deep state. I think he coined the term, quite frankly, in politics, the deep state.
Yeah.
So they were his target, and therefore he became theirs.
Okay, so the other headline is the Epstein story, and it came up in the cabinet meeting yesterday, which is so interesting. And before Attorney General Bondi could respond, the president interrupted her and said, "Why are you guys talking about this? And are you talking about Epstein, the bad guy, and all this and that?" So the question does remain. I think it boils down to two things. Number one, have they clearly proved that he committed suicide? And number two, why can't the client list be released?
Well, supposedly there is no client list now.
Well, there's flight logs.
Well, right. I mean, there was something called the Lolita Express. He had multiple homes. And let's not forget, this also goes back to Comey, but someone named Maureen Comey, the daughter of James Comey. She was the leading prosecutor in the Southern District of New York. She's the one that originally brought these charges. But what I found most interesting, in this investigation, they didn't raid any of his houses except for one. And the one that they raided was in New York. He had a ranch in Texas that no one talks about. He had the island, that the Lolita Express went to. He had a flat in Italy. And I think he had another property somewhere. But they didn't seem to raid any of that, or at least we don't know about it. So I think that the kind of the mop up or the cleanup was very early on. They simply took him down because he probably did have a ton of blackmail on some very powerful people, both domestically and internationally. I've also heard reports that he was affiliated with the CIA since his 30s, and he worked very closely with the Israeli government, the Mossad. So, I don't know, honestly, what to believe when it comes to Jeffrey Epstein, but I do believe that the FBI and Pam Bondi only had what they had that was provided to them by the prior administration. And we already know that between probably November, when Trump was reelected, or second time elected, to January, they had a lot of time to do a lot of cleaning.
Why wouldn't she say that? That she was. She got a lot more information than she had initially. She got boxes full, but what you just said, it wasn't complete. Why doesn't she bring that forward?
It wasn't complete.
Yeah.
I don't think it was complete. I do remember reading maybe 1 or 2 weeks ago, that the FBI, led by Kash Patel, found that there was a whole separate kind of 7th floor FBI unit that was working outside of the purview they were working under the director, but it wasn't known, right? It was like this whole clandestine operation within the FBI. And they were, hitting roadblocks when they were trying to dig in and find, personnel files, investigations that were opened and have suddenly just, the contents have disappeared. So you only know what you know, and you only have what you have, right? So whatever has been given to them or passed on to this administration is incomplete at best and destroyed at worst.
So do you think the handling of this, Megan, is going to hurt the Trump base? It doesn't seem to be complete. It almost seems to be that they're deliberately withholding information. That's not going over well. So what do they do to fix this?
I've the Trump base we're quite a cast of characters, aren't we? Quite the motley crew. But that's what you get when you have a big tent. I mean, Trump won a mandate. He pulled in a ton of different, not only demographics, but people, libertarians, Democrats, Republicans, independents, people that have never voted before. And we've got, very loud and, influencers, I hate that word, influencers that have been riding the coattails of his presidency and aren't always loyal. Yet, I don't think that anyone should be loyal to the president necessarily, of course, unless you're in the administration. But, my job as a journalist is to hold people in power accountable. And I don't care if you're a Republican or Democrat. But pulling the base together is hurting cats. What I think, and I think a lot of this is noise right now, and I think some of it's justified, especially when it comes to Epstein. There's a lot of questions. But what Trump can do is continue to operate above the noise and deliver his agenda to the American people and turn this country around. Because when you have a booming economy, when you have safety and security, that's what people are going to be talking about, and that's what people vote for. Yeah. These controversies, these conspiracies, and I don't like to call them conspiracies, but they're controversial and they're conspiratorial. Will fade into the background, but there will be people that will hold on to these like pit bulls on a bone.
Yeah, no, I get it. I totally get it. All right, let me switch your attention. The president won a big one yesterday where the Supreme Court said, yeah, you can go ahead and cut jobs out of the government. This is huge. He's slowly winning these things. And what's interesting, even the Supreme Court came down, as you well know, and went after these lower courts' injunctions, except for the other day where the federal court tried to defund Planned Parenthood in the big bill as being funded through Medicaid. Where does that go?
Well, two points I'd like to make, just going back to the Supreme Court and their ruling, there was one dissent. Did you notice who dissented? And that was Justice Ketanji Brown. And in her dissent, it read that they really don't know what's going on the ground. So they're really not aware of what's going on the ground. Well, that's not your job, bro. Your job is to interpret the law, okay, and then determine, specific to this case, whether or not the president has the executive authority and he was operating within his executive authority to do X, Y, and Z.
Right.
She can't seem to wrap her mind around that. She always has to make these very pointed political statements within her opinion. But that aside, we've now got a TRO, which the district court judge, I believe she's out of San Francisco. I believe she's a Clinton appointee. We have another rogue district federal court judge that has defined the Supreme Court and creates a TRO out of thin air, does not apply any sort of reasoning behind that TRO. And so now it's up to the Trump administration to file an emergency appeal, which will go to the Supreme Court.
Okay. I think you're right. And eventually that gets overturned.
But I was under the impression, and forgive me because maybe I'm wrong here and someone can straighten me out. Yeah. Under the Hyde Act, which has existed for decades, taxpayer dollars are not supposed to be going to fund abortions.
Right.
So how all of a sudden are my tax dollars now wrapped up into Medicaid abortions? Medicaid.
Yeah, that's the big mystery. Good point. Excellent point. One other quick thing before I take a break. Your quick comment on what's happening in New York, and Cuomo got beat by a socialist, and Adams could get reelected as an independent. What does that tell you?
Well, I think people in New York are sick and tired of the spiraling crime, the drug use, and the illegal aliens that have flooded, their boroughs. But then on the flip side of that, and this isn't going to be a quick comment, so maybe we can talk about the communists that won the Democrat primary.
A little over. Let me take a break, gather your thoughts. Let me come back. Let me take a quick break. I want to hear what she has to say. Megan Barth with us, investigative independent journalist. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Always a joy to have with us Megan Barth. She's a independent investigative journalist. Always fun to have her because her perspective, well, she actually teaches me things. Anyway, we're talking about what's going on with New York. The Democrats have literally elected in their primary a socialist communist. The current mayor has left the Democratic Party. He's now running as an independent. And in the middle of all this, Cuomo tried to come back, and he basically got his hat handed to him. So what's happening in New York?
Well, that's a kind of a loaded question, but, they have imported the third world. And when you import the third world, specifically the third world that are takers and not makers, you get an electorate of takers. And that's exactly what New York has right now, is an electorate of takers, an electorate that is dependent on government because they came from socialist countries. And now they can demand the best benefits, quite frankly, in the world. I've been watching TikTok videos and, Twitter or X, and, you see, people abusing on a daily basis Medicaid, food stamps, housing vouchers, et cetera, and the list goes on and on. They are living better, illegal aliens specifically in New York. And let's remember that illegal aliens can vote in New York. Illegal aliens are making thousands of dollars a month, and they're also being provided free housing. But they're making thousands of dollars a month in benefits. And, when you start, and I don't mean to make a direct correlation here, but if you, for example, go to a wildlife preserve, or you go to a national park, or you go to a zoo, there's a sign that says don't feed the animals. And the reason you don't feed the animals is because they become dependent. And that's exactly what the Democrat Party continually and has always advocated for, is dependence on government. And with Biden's open borders, you now have tens of millions of people that were let in from the third world, tens of millions of takers. It wasn't like we were importing or allowing the invasion of nuclear scientists across our southern border. The next Newton is not going to be found, in the caravans. And you did have countries like Venezuela emptying their prisons and sending them over here through Tren de Aragua. So this is what New York has. They've created this dependency state. They have also imported, and if you look at the videos, tens of thousands of Muslims who have not assimilated. In fact, they're marching for Hamas on the streets of New York. And it'll be a very interesting race to watch. And what I find also very interesting is that the Democrats, whether it's Kathy Hochul or Hakeem Jeffries or whoever from New York, is coming out and defending Kami Bandami. Oh, he's not a communist, but he just quoted the Communist Manifesto. Oh, he's not a Marxist. Well, he just quoted Karl Marx. Please don't tell me I'm not seeing what I'm seeing with my own two eyes.
Yeah.
And hearing with my own two ears. And that's what the Democrats are trying to convince us, that he's some sort of, moderate. Yeah. When he talks about nationalizing the bodegas. the bodegas and the bodega owners, the small business owners, are going to be the ones that are first crushed under the hands of socialism.
Yeah.
Especially when they take over the bodegas.
Well, we'll have to wait and see what happens. It's just an oddity, to say the least. The president spoke very firmly about that, but we'll see does he stick his nose in this election. I mean, I think at the end of the day, President Trump still loves New York and would like to see it, and wants to see it saved, if I can put it that way, and preserved.
We all do. I mean, we all should. I mean, we all should want New York saved. I don't obviously live in New York. I have no relatives in New York. I have no personal affiliation or connection to New York. But as American, okay, New York is one of the most important international cities.
Yeah.
And to allow this city to be taken over by a publicly admitted, basically socialist and Marxist, hopefully President Trump and others can do everything they can to stop that hostile takeover, because that's what it is.
Well, we want to see New York saved. We want to see San Francisco restored. We want to see Portland, Oregon restored. We want to see Seattle saved.
LA.
There's a pattern there that's pretty obvious.
Isn't it?
Yeah. All right, a couple of other things. The other day, quite the powwow at the White House with President Trump and his team, and across the table was Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his team. I always find it interesting that before these big powwows occur, the president always allows the press in to ask any question they may want. So, I mean, he's been pretty transparent with all that. But in the middle of that, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stands up and hands President Trump a letter nominating for the Nobel Peace Prize. I thought, well, okay, I'd like to know what the Megan Barth take is on that, because, well, what's your take on that?
Well, President Trump in my lifetime has probably been one of the most active presidents in the Middle East, with the Abraham Accords, with moving the embassy to Jerusalem, with negotiating a peace deal between Hamas and Israel, between Pakistan and India, and the list goes on and on. And then, of course, we've got Ukraine and Russia still fighting, and President Trump says, well, we're going to have to send them some defensive weapons, which is quite an about face. I think we need to stop sending weapons, period. And they've got plenty. They've got plenty of money to buy their own weapons, our money. But I think from a Middle East perspective and from an Israeli perspective, and just from a foreign policy perspective, President Trump has led with peace through strength. So he showed the strength. He has publicly declared that, no one wants, well, except for the war machine, no one wants war. And we don't want to be dragged into another international conflict like we were in the Middle East and Afghanistan, et cetera. So I think that if any president in my lifetime deserves a Nobel Peace Prize, it certainly wasn't Barack Obama. It would be President Trump.
Do you think, Megan, kind of a 30,000-foot view, why are we tolerating the UN?
That's $1 million question. And then why are we tolerating Ukraine's position to want to get into NATO, to violate a treaty that has been there since the 1950s? When you've got segments of the United Nations that have, for example, like Iran on the Human Rights Council, I mean, that should just tell you it's an absolute joke.
Right.
So I don't really have a good answer for that.
And the only reason I bring that up, I mean, hey, look, sitting in our country is an organization that hates our country.
Which organization? The Democratic Party?
Well, maybe there's two.
Yeah. Okay.
Good point. But I don't know. I guess that's an endless question. But you just wonder if it's possible that we end up treating the UN kind of like we're treating NATO. Sorry for all the money we're giving you. We're going to start pulling it back. what happens?
Yeah, and like WHO as well, the World Health Organization. You know, these are international globalist entities that have lost their shine and have been hijacked, quite frankly, by the radical globalists
Yeah.
and despots from around the world. So it would be a great idea, and I would like to see that walked back. And the next thing I would like to see, or in coordination with that, is the Trump administration declare the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization.
Yeah, it's time.
And then what we're going to see here domestically will be a ripple effect of people that don't understand the magnitude of that designation yet.
Yeah. Hey, good to see you. Thanks for your time. You're always charming,
too,
and best to you. And keep writing.
Best to you.
Keep investigating.
I will keep writing. Maybe I'll have some big news for you next time I see you.
I'm waiting. I'm waiting.
Me too.
Okay, see you. Thanks.
Thank you.